captured in the smoke and fire of the front. Many German soldiers believed the door ahead meant only hunger, punishment, and despair. But on their first night, inside a U.S. prisoner of war camp, a different smell drifted through the wooden barracks, steak hissing on a steel griddle, the clink of utensils on aluminum mess trays, and almost unbelievable a pack of American cigarettes from the camp canteen. This story doesn't polish war until it gleams. It shines a light on an overlooked corner of it, how prisoners were treated, and why a proper meal could change how a man saw his enemy and himself. To understand why German POWs in America ate decently, sometimes even, well, why they had meat, vegetables, coffee, and occasionally cigarettes, we start with law. The treatment of prisoners of war in the Second World War was defined by international conventions, whose core principle was simple but profound: protect basic human dignity. That meant food and shelter, medical care, the right to correspondence, and work only within safe limits, with compensation or equivalent benefits. From a military perspective, humane treatment was not just legal, it was strategic. Camps needed order more than anything. Starved, frightened men become brittle, unpredictable men. Clear rules, predictable routines, and basic creature comforts reduced tension, discouraged violence, and encouraged cooperation with camp procedures. Humane didn't mean indulgent. It meant disciplined administration that kept thousands of strangers from collapsing into chaos. A captured soldier's first hours were routine and strict. Weapons gone, belts and field gear collected. The column moved beneath watchtowers and barbed wire toward the processing huts. It was a long way from the desert heat of North Africa, the hills of Italy, or the gray waters of the Atlantic. The first surprise many recorded was not a barked order, but a doctor. Medical examinations came first: lice checks, vaccinations, treatment for wounds and infections. Then came delousing, hot water, and clean clothing suitable to the season. Each man was registered, issued a prisoner number, and briefed often with an interpreter on camp rules, roll call times, meal schedules, work details, recreation areas, canteen access, mail, and complaint procedures. Alongside those rights, there were non-negotiables. Attempts to escape would be punished. Violence and agitation would be dealt with firmly. The impression was contradictory, but clear. Strict discipline wrapped around a transparent system. Even that transparency was a shock to men accustomed to the uncertainty of the front. Then the kitchen bell rang. Prisoners formed an orderly line, mess trays in hand, eyes drifting toward vats of food, rolling and bubbling with steam. American field kitchens were built for scale. Hundreds of portions measured, ladled, and served with industrial precision. On that first night, many POWs found meat on their tray, sometimes steak, often a hearty stew alongside mashed potatoes, greens or beans, a slice of bread, and a cup of hot coffee. For men coming straight from a battlefield, where rations could be late, light, or absent, it felt like cultural whiplash. Some hesitated. Was this a trick before interrogation? Was the second night going to be different? But the rhythm held. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, hot, consistent, predictable. Not every camp or cook earned praise. Some meals were bland. Tinned items made frequent appearances. Yet the baseline remained: protein, starch, and vegetables designed to maintain health, not break spirits. There were small cultural details, too. Americans poured coffee like they meant it, full cups, sometimes weak to a German palate. Yet even a weak coffee warms the hands. The smell of bread, the low murmur of conversation, the scrape of chair legs across wooden floors, tiny threads, knitting a sense of normal in a place where normal wasn't supposed to exist. The next surprise was the camp canteen, the PX. Within strict limits, and under close rules, many prisoners could purchase basic items: soap, razors, stationery, chocolate, and most startling of all, cigarettes. To a man newly torn from the front, holding an American cigarette felt almost surreal. It wasn't about flavor. It was what the cigarette represented: a civilian rhythm, a pause, a small ceremony of peacetime that war had ground to dust. For camp administrators, those small items mattered. A cigarette after dinner became a pressure valve. Men gathered in small clusters, talking softly, swapping stories of home, comparing dialects, dividing a pack. In those fragile half-hours, community spread through the barracks like lamplight. It soothed men who were otherwise strangers to one another, with too much time to think and too little to do. Here lies one of war's stranger truths. The man holding the rifle is not always the one eating better. On the front lines, supply was fickle, trucks delayed, bridges bombed, depots lost. German soldiers had learned to get by. Hard bread, thin soup, tins when lucky, nothing when not. By contrast, the camp diet was stable. Meals came at the same hours every day. Portions were calculated for activity level. Medical staff tracked weight. In a notebook, a prisoner might jot down meat on Tuesday, eggs on Thursday, extra greens on Sunday. Years later, those lines sound simple, even childish. But when calamity is the background noise of your life, a regular dinner is a symphony. These notes were not praise for the enemy. They were proof that a man's identity includes more than his uniform. Hunger or satiety, warmth or cold, fear or rest, these shape a memory as much as any battle map. Why treat them this way? A guard might be asked. Because that's the law, he could answer. And because that's how you keep a camp quiet. Veteran administrators understood the real threat wasn't a dagger hidden under a mattress. It was a long winter of bitterness and boredom. Clear rules, predictable meals, medical care, and small privileges took oxygen away from resentment. Humane treatment did not weaken security. The fence still stood. The towers stayed manned. Roll calls were counted and recounted. There were zones where nobody crossed, and consequences when they did. Within those boundaries, a hot drink or a cigarette after chow was not softness. It was smart policy, the kind that turns thousands of potential problems into tired men who wanted to sleep. Suspicion was natural in the first days. Is this a trick? But routines repeated without fail. Meals on time, lights out on schedule, mail processed and posted, purchases logged. Consistency was the medicine that healed doubt. And then, many prisoners did something they had not done for a long while. They wrote. Diaries filled with small entries, the evening menu, a Sunday baseball game, the face of a man from a regiment they'd never met in the field, the distinctive smell of American coffee. When the war ended, those pages became a different kind of archive, not of troop movements or unit rosters, but of human temperature. They recorded the sensation of being suspended between two lives, front and home, and of retaining a sliver of dignity in a place designed to erase choice. The phrase, the well-fed enemy, stirred anger in some quarters during the war. Feeding the foe sounded like a betrayal. But look closer, and you see another logic. A strong society doesn't need starvation to prove its strength. It proves it through discipline, organization, and confidence that human dignity is not a trophy for victors, but a rule for everyone. When the guns fell silent, many former prisoners carried home a pocketful of odd memories. Their first cup of American coffee, the time they set type for a camp newsletter on a squeaky stencil machine, the quiet happiness of opening a pack of cigarettes on a cold evening behind a fence. They did not tell these stories to glorify their captors. They told them to remind their children and themselves that even in the middle of history's loudest cruelty, people can choose to act in ways that make the world slightly less cruel. If you want more on POW life letters and postcards, Sunday baseball, English classes, or the nights when the projector clicked and Hollywood washed across a barracks wall, tell us which chapter to explore next. Like and subscribe so you don't miss the quieter stories of war where humanity found room to breathe.